The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office is giving us an update on this officer-involved shooting on the west side. Let's listen.
They attempt to stop the suspect in the vehicle located behind our crime scene van. The suspect took off on foot. There was a brief foot chase down Kane Lane, which is parallel to Broadway Avenue. When they located the suspect about the 5800 block of Kane Lane, they ordered him to stop. He then pulled a Glock handgun and fired it at the two detectives who were in tack gear at the time, clearly marked as police officers. He fired. Luckily, he missed. Those two detectives returned fire and radioed in their location, and the suspect then took off running west from Kane Lane towards a different residence on Broadway Avenue. We don't believe the suspect lived in either one of those houses. He was jumping fences armed with a handgun. That is an armed burglary, as well as the other charges we had. It appears that he laid down in a wooded area there. Everyone held their positions. It looks like 10 minutes later, he then encounters two different detectives on the opposite side on Broadway Avenue. He shoots at those detectives. Those detectives then return fire and appear to strike the suspect, and he goes down in the front yard of a residence there. After carefully assessing the situation, they determined that he was still holding the gun. His finger was still on the trigger of that handgun. We brought K-9 over to assist. We determined that he was no longer a threat. Rescue arrived at the scene. He was pronounced dead there in the front yard. The state attorney's office is here with us. They are conducting their independent investigation. Obviously, we're running through the crime scene. There were multiple rounds fired by our detectives. We've got to, obviously capture all those casings, make sure we have an accurate count. None of our detectives were hurt. They will all be placed on administrative leave, which is pretty standard. I don't have an identity yet on the suspect. We have not made next of kin notification. We're still waiting on that, but once that identification and a photo of the gun are ready, our PIO will send that out to you as we normally do. And I can take a few questions.
My apologies for making you repeat some of this stuff, but some of our viewers just came in. You're live right now with them. Could you explain the narcotics operation that led to this shooting?
Sure.
And the suspect that they had identified and surveilling?
Yeah, our narcotics overdose squad, they specifically go after drug dealers who help or contribute to overdose deaths. Most of those are fentanyl overdoses. That is a terrible plague in our community right now. Like I said, we've had over 380 overdose deaths just in Duval County this year. That's more than one a day, way higher than any other contributing factor to death in the community. So that squad targets those. This was a very recent investigation. We determined he was the dealer in that overdose death, and so they did their work and tracked him here, and then a foot pursuit, and then the shooting and exchange of gunfire like I exchanged.
Do you have any idea as to the number of gunshots fired by the suspect and then by
Several.
the officers?
Several from him and numerous from us.
Can you speak at all, because this is not a unpopulated area, can you talk about the complexity when you're talking about a populated area and exchanging gunfire in that context?
Luckily, no one was out in the backyards. No one was in the front yards. It appears to just be the police and the suspect, thankfully. Nobody else was hit with gunfire. It looks like maybe a house behind the suspect was struck, but it was a concrete block house that didn't penetrate the house. So obviously we always check to see where all of our bullets go, where all of his bullets go, and no one else appears to be harmed or other than that house, nothing else is damaged.
So you said it started at around 12:30 when
Right.
kind of the brief chase started. When did it end?
It ended probably, there's about a 10-minute gap between the two encounters with the suspect shooting at them, so I would guess around 1 o'clock or so.
You had said the suspect was driving the silver sedan that's behind the cruisers right now. Were your undercover officers in the black minivan that was taken away?
Well, they're narcotics. I'm not going to tell you what they were driving.
Okay.
Sorry.
Total number of personnel that are on administrative leave now?
4.
And 2 detectives, 2 officers?
They're all 4. Well, they're 4 detectives. Yeah.
Okay.
They were dressed in tack gear today. They were working the overdose case.
What should the public know about this? Is this is there any threat, danger to the public at this time?
Don't use drugs, specifically fentanyl, and no, I mean it's contained. We had him contained. There's nobody outstanding, no more of a risk, and this guy doesn't appear to be selling drugs anymore. So,
as far as body camera footage, is that a factor
yes.
here as well as?
Yes, all that will be reviewed and assessed, and then released once the state says that it's good to go.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
You've been listening to an update there from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. This all started with a narcotics investigation. They were going after someone they thought was a drug dealer responsible for overdose deaths. We've been talking so much about the fentanyl crisis, and this is it right here is what they're talking about. They say that the suspect was armed with a gun. He fired at 4 detectives at different points of time during the day today. They were in tactical gear. No officers were hurt. The suspect was killed when police returned fire. At this point, they have not released his identity. They've not even notified his next of kin, but they say this suspect, the one who was killed, is the only one injured. All of those 4 detectives involved in this case, they are now on administrative leave, which is standard protocol. And tonight on First Coast News at 11, we're going very deep into this opioid crisis. We're going to talk about the overdose deaths that are happening, the fentanyl that's coming into our country that's being sold right here on the First Coast. So you can see our special investigation tonight on First Coast News at 11. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back.